Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Beth Gaddis, and I'm the editor-in-chief at Planet DDS. This is going to be a great conversation we're going to have today about how DSOs are using APIs to drive growth. I'm joined by Joel Olivio, the Chief Information and Security Officer for Dental Care Alliance, one of the largest DSOs in the country with more than 400 locations. Also joining us today is Dr. Derek Giddon, the founder and CEO of AirPay, which tackles the complex challenges of revenue cycle management, including automating benefit verification and cost calculation. And then I'd like to invite you to meet my colleague, Cameron So, who leads the API and integration strategy for Denticon Practice Management and has a lot of use cases to share during today's conversation. So thank you all for joining us today. This is really great. Joel, I wanted to go ahead and begin with you. APIs have been around for a while. What's different now? What has you excited?
Sure. Thanks for the question and thanks for the invite here to the webinar. I'm really thrilled and honored to be a part of this session. So, to answer your question, kind of transparently, is dentistry had to catch up with technology, right? So we're used to systems that are, kind of antiquated as it relates to technology, and so APIs are, not necessarily a newer thing, but they're definitely newer to dentistry as, again, like I said, dentistry catches up to technology here. So, with the introduction of APIs and then systems integrating now with these APIs, it has brought upon improved interoperability, some patient engagement, automation, security is another big one for us as well, and ultimately just bringing additional operational efficiencies to our practices. So it's definitely been impactful movement for technology for dentistry, and I'm excited to see the future.
Now, we're going to get into a lot of different ways that you're specifically using APIs and the benefits that it's bringing. But first, let's take a step back. Cam, you have described this next generation of APIs as the key to Dental OS. Take us through what you mean by that.
Yeah, Beth. So Planet DDS sees its practice management platforms, Cloud9 and Denticon, as a dental operating system. What that means is we care a ton about operability. We fully understand that there are problems that the PMS is capable of solving, and there are those problems that we would love for the innovation in the dental software ecosystem to be able to facilitate and solve. As such, it's very important for the APIs to be designed in a way that handles data both securely and efficiently, and for Denticon and Cloud9 to have the requisite workflows to bring that data into the system and update the system accordingly. And thanks for flashing the slide on this page. As a product manager, of course, I start thinking about what are the key problems that an office like Joel's are trying to resolve when it comes to increasing practice efficiency, saving time with duplicative data entry, having a view into their operational and financial analytics so that they can turn analytics into action, into outcomes. So these are some key use cases that we have identified in conversation with Joel and other DSOs. And we understand that APIs are key to facilitating data warehouse and sync processes, of course, powering internal line of business applications, importantly, being able to connect a vendor of their choice to solve a problem that may be unique to them with the requisite amount of data operation and data resources to have that seamless connectivity with our dental OS, reducing data manual entry, what Joel mentioned in terms of being able to power a lot of these patient engagement type of workflows, as well as enabling analytics. So for us, we really focus on making more data types available, making our platform more resilient and scalable, providing the parameters and responses that integrators need to power their workflows, in a hope of expanding our ecosystem so that really it becomes a marketplace for our DSO partners to choose their partner of choice.
And Derek, one of the things that I think is really unique is that you're a dentist. You were telling us that you began practicing when people still had paper records. So you've really seen this evolution in technology. Talk to us a little bit about, from your point of view as both a dentist and then also, as the founder of AirPay, what APIs mean. How has it gone from the way they used to be able to do things to how you're able to do them now because of the technology?
Sure. Yep. So thanks again for inviting me. Definitely when I was practicing, I didn't even know what the hell an API was. So I started practicing in 2010. So I've been in the game a while. And the office that I worked in was super old school. We had paper charts. We had a practice management system that I think no one's ever heard of. And
No, it wasn't
so
Dentacon.
it wasn't no, nope. I've never seen it since. With all the thousands of offices that we talked to, I've never seen anyone using. I won't name it, but yeah. So we did everything manually, and I didn't even really know that there was a better way. Obviously now in building software, can kind of see all the different practice management systems that are out there. And so obviously, APIs and just, cloud-based PMS is something that I never even really could kind of envision when I was practicing. But in building software now, obviously, AirPay is very focused on automating insurance verification. In our practice, this was definitely done by hand. We saw over 100 patients a day. We would go on web portals. We would call the payers. We would wait for faxes. Patients would wait sometimes 30 minutes while we were checking their insurance. And so, having the ability to automate that is pretty amazing. And kind of seeing the impact that has. So I definitely see it and can kind of, really feel it and feel the pain and feel the impact that we're having from the provider perspective and a practice owner perspective. And then in building software, we don't have API connections with every practice management system. We didn't with Dentacon back in the day when we first got started. And we were still able to support Dentacon practices through a report upload, to get kind of specific here. And it had a huge impact, and you could verify 100 patients in seconds or minutes, but it was still a bit tedious to upload that report. And having the API connection was really a game changer. And the advancements that Dentacon and Planet are making with the APIs will really be, I think, another game changer to really help us automate the process from end to end.
What everybody hates, right? If you work in a dental practice, you hate that you have to have so many windows open and that you have to be clicking from tab to tab. And I really think that's the biggest problem, or one of the biggest problems that APIs are changing. So right now, Derek, even with the APIs, right, you were saying that you would still have to have like your practice management open on one screen, and then you'd have to have AirPay open on the other. With the new generation of APIs with read-write capability, that goes away, correct?
Yeah. So if you think about kind of what the status quo is today, you have whatever PMS system you have open, you have your browser open, and you have about 100 tabs open with every payer portal. And obviously there's more to running a practice than just verification. So all the different systems that you need. So there's having that back and forth is certainly not ideal. Again, going back to like 14 years ago, it's a lot better than the way we did it then. But this next era of having read write and being able to just have what AirPay provides in terms of data retrieval and cost calculation, but just seeing it right in Dentacon is obviously a pretty big deal.
Yeah. And I would love to root that in some data points, right? I think studies have shown that API-driven automated workflows can save 20% of, admin or processing time, give any given process. And, in talking about sort of this next generation and our vision of how we, want to grow our API capabilities, this write back is super important. It's from a consumer experience perspective, it's great, right? Having writebacks mean, less time sitting on the bench and less time for office staff to confirm and bug the patient. But it does represent an investment from, companies that create PMSs like Planet DDS to say, we think that this is an important problem to solve, and we're willing to tackle that technical challenge.
A perfect example to that is walk-in patients, right? A patient can walk in today and we can do insurance verification on the fly while the patient is being seen. know exactly what their benefits are. And so when they're checking out, they immediately know what their costs are going to be. We know what their costs are going to be, what their insurance is going to cover, what it's not going to cover, And so before we had to make phone calls, we had to sit on and fill out forms, do faxing, that whole manual process. And now it's all automated with the use of APIs.
Joel, drill down into that a little bit more. Because of it being automated, do you have any data that you can share about like how much time it saved or how it may have saved on staffing to, freeing up people's time so they can spend more time, actually with the patients when they're in the practice?
Time is hard to quantify, but at DCA, we are obviously working towards operational efficiencies throughout the organization, and APIs is definitely helping us leverage that. So as Cameron kind of alluded to, the industry is seeing 20 to 30% of operational cost savings by using APIs. We're seeing improved user engagement as well. Development costs. It's something really DCA doesn't take on as development costs, and so utilizing vendors that already have the tools, already have the connectivity, already have the endpoints configured into Dentacon system is helping us so that we don't have to pay for development costs. Data accessibility, error reduction. I mean, I can just go on and on of how this is creating deeper efficiencies for dentistry across the entire industry, and it's been great to see.
And Derek, you had some hard stats that you were sharing with me about time savings when you're able to automate insurance verification and the cost calculation. Do you want to go ahead and share those with everybody?
Yeah, I mean, CAQH says 10 minutes saved with electronic verification. Even if it's half of that, even if it's 5 minutes. I mean, again, some verifications, if you're doing them by hand, could take a minute or 2 minutes. Everybody that works in dental offices knows that even when it's easy, it's hard. You can get locked out of the portals, and entering in the wrong passwords. There's all these very kind of practice level frustrations with the web portal. And again, that's when it's easy. When it's hard and you have to call for something, you could sit on the phone for 45 minutes with an insurance carrier. And everybody knows what I'm talking about. I mean, that's very real. So again, CAQH says 10 minutes, even if it's 5 minutes and you see 50 patients a day, that's a couple hours a day. If you have 50 locations, that's real. Those are real numbers. Those are real hours throughout the year. And again, what practically happens at the offices is everyone's got a phone glued to their ear, and they're completely inundated with this kind of like manual, tedious work that doesn't allow them to do more value add activities, whether it's just talking to a patient that's standing in front of them, or calling patients up to get them in for their recall visits. There's obviously a lot more efficient ways for them to spend their time. So again, as the organizations grow, and obviously Dentacon serves a lot of DSOs, and we work with a lot of DSOs. I think the larger the organization, obviously the bigger the impact.
Well, one of the things that's really driving this is that, consumer behavior has really changed over the years. And so, Joel, you talked about walk-in patients, but I mean, one of the ways that I think it's really changed is, how people make appointments now. It used to be that you'd call up to make an appointment, or you'd get a phone call that you'd be answering and scheduling. Like, nobody wants to do that anymore. So Cam, talk to me a little bit about how like online scheduling in particular has really changed, and with read-write capability now with APIs, how that's evolved.
Yeah, first reflecting back on what the group has said so far, I love this I have this mental picture of like sort of a baby crawling to now all of a sudden flying a plane, right? It's sort of like we start at a place where we're at paper records, we have some ability to extract data from the PMS, we have some get endpoints that allow you to get data, and now we're really thinking about the next step of how do you have the sufficient write back so that we do actualize that opportunity to save time. And to your point, yeah, appointment booking is like such a critical activity, right? When you think about increasing utilization and being able to predict production. As such, I think we take an approach at Planet DDS where our PMSs do a few things. through the API, when you ask for availability, we take care of all of the calculations around, hey, when are your providers available? When are they on holiday? Where are they on lunch? At what operatory are they working at? All of that sort of like information that if we didn't design our system in the right way, that for an integrator to work with the PMS and a specific practice to derive that, that's kind of a difficult thing because there's so many layers to it. So our approach is that we're going to take care of all of that in our architecture to make the API as simple as asking, hey, what procedure and preferred time of day are you looking for? And we'll give you explicitly bookable availability. Beyond that, of course, we have the ability to confirm or cancel a patient in support of these reminder campaigns. We give recall information so that integrators can design campaigns to automate these recall notifications to get folks back into the office. And I think we're taking one step further to think about patient forms and information updates. I think we're also used to now being able to update our information with our cell phone provider, whoever, right, in an app, and for that to just flow through an update. So we, in this new version of the API we've launched, we have specifically taken that in mind to think about, well, how much time can folks save if we're allowing folks to submit an image of their driver's license or insurance card in advance. If patients are able to do their medical history updates prior to an appointment and have that information automatically be updated in the PMS, how much time that can save, right? To Derek's point, it may be a small number when you're looking at a single use case, but incrementally, it really adds up for the office.
Joel, tell us a little bit about some of the other problems that DCA is solving through the new technology that's available now.
Yeah, so I think we're kind of focused on the front office and front end time type of things, but there's a lot of back end operations too that are being exploited in this as well. So from billing and claim processing, to supply chain management, inventory management as well, utilizing APIs to pull this data quickly so that we have access to it. We know exactly what inventory exists in our offices as we roll out and deploy new products. We can get things to the offices quicker. As far as billing and claims processing, we can get paid faster, right? So DSOs can get the checks in the bank faster. That's more areas behind the scenes, as well as I mentioned, kind of touch on it briefly, is insurance verification. Behind the scenes, it's happening. Front offices don't have to worry about it. So again, it continues to evolve. We are excited about the opportunity. DCA continues to grow into technology and continue to put technology first in our offices to help out our providers and areas where they probably aren't even aware of, right? And so we're working towards solutions that are really impactful for the entire organization.
And Joel, you just mentioned, that you're looking at being able to get information to data in real time and be able to make decisions based on that. Talk a little bit about what it means now to be able to have data at your fingertips and how you're using it.
We can report off of it. That's the biggest advantage of this is analytics, right? Analytics. That's all I hear nowadays is numbers, metrics. So, we're having this data quickly through APIs. We can provide it to our front line so they know exactly where their mark is. They know what their goals are. They know how their percentages, how quick they can get there, the time frame they need to get there by, and then they know what their scheduling looks like, where they have gaps, where do they need to maneuver, what procedures can they bring in the door, that kind of thing. So it helps us schedule better, helps us get patients in, helps us communicate with patients quicker and faster. So you don't have to do the integrated phone call. You can do text messages, you can do portals, all automated processes to get the data to the practices faster.
And Cam, we had a question that came in, just for a person who might not be living in this, high tech world. Can you talk about what read back and write back means?
Yeah, so when when you think about APIs, it's sort of a bridge to connect two systems together, and there are different operations that an API can do. It's we typically have a get operation or request where you're basically just reading data from a database or from a PMS, and then you have writebacks where you're authorizing the integrator or third party to use a secure mechanism through API. It's always authenticated, it's always permission based to write back the data in a structured way that adheres to the schema of the database. So that's really where the time saving comes in when you think about automating appointment confirmation, where you have to update a status within a platform, updating insurance eligibility verification information related to a patient's benefits and coverage, right? All of that stuff. If you don't have the write back, it would mean the person going from one browser to another, say they have two applications together to write that. And another term that we're really excited to be able to say at Planet DDS is a focus on webhooks. So again, a technical concept, but the idea that with Joel's use cases, for example, with analytics, yes, there's the ability for you to get data maybe on a daily basis from reports or data exports, but with APIs, you can either pull the system consistently a few times an hour to get the latest refresh, or a more advanced way, and a way that we're really starting to think about at Planet DDS is how can we capture the data that has changed within the system for records that you're interested in, say patient information, insurance information, appointment information, treatment plan information, and for us to proactively push those changes to a destination system, right? So that it's less effort for folks to stay in sync, and also the data becomes more near real time.
I saw
Also,
one of the questions pop up. Sorry, Derek.
Oh, I was just going to say a very practical example of read and write is just to use AirPay as an example, because we're obviously partnered with Planet and access the API. We can read today the appointment schedule and all the subscriber information, and that allows us, we read that every night, and we can automate verification according to the schedule of the patients that are coming in. And today you access that information in AirPay in a separate, in a separate window, as we said before. What we're talking about with writeback is being able to actually, that information that we've now retrieved from all the different payers and however we access our insurance data will then be written back into Denticon. So you don't need to go to AirPay to view that information. You would just see it right in Denticon.
I think it's
do you have
important
something
to
else?
highlight the error reporting piece of that, Derek, as well, right? When you're using APIs, your errors are going to be a lot less than when you have manual users intervening and typing something out.
100%, yeah.
So that's definitely one of the efficiencies we received out of that too, is that.
For sure. I mean, the obviously, a big solution traditionally for DSOs especially has been, outsourced teams that do some of like the tedious tasks around rev cycle, and it's left to human error. In that case, there's agents, whether they're in-house or an internal or they're offshore, that are reading and writing information. And obviously through APIs, it's done automatically, it's done electronically, and so the error rate is much less.
Yeah, and we, of course, we have validation in place to say, hey, this data doesn't adhere to a specific format, or hey, this may be a potential error. So really great points there, Joel and Derek.
Yeah, I saw one of the messages come into the chat there about security, and so I wanted to just quickly touch base on that, being the CISO of DCA. And I strongly encourage our teams to utilize APIs over any kind of RPA method or file transfer or whatever, because that data is encrypted at rest and in transit. We want to make sure that our patients' data is the most secure that it can be across the environment. So not only do we vet on a regular basis Planet DDS's security processes, and procedures, but we also vet the vendors that we are engaging with to ensure that their processes and security procedures are aligned with what DCA's expectations are to ensure that our patient data is always protected. And APIs allow for that, again, to ensure that encryption is from end to end.
And Cam, if it can expand upon that, like, people might not be as familiar with the term RPA, but if you can talk about what RPA is, what scraping is, kind of like who might use that technology currently in order to get information, and then how APIs works better.
Yeah, well, RPA stands for robotic process automation. We can think about this as a programmed robot that emulates the behavior of a human. So I think in the use case that Joel's articulating, we may have some integrators, or we wouldn't call them integrators really, but we have some third party who's interested in extracting data from a PMS, and to do so, instead of having an authenticated connection via the API where the encryption happens, you're basically saying, hey, let's set up a robot to move the mouse to a specific area within your application, do a bit of copy and paste, or really more sophisticatedly look at the code to be able to extract that data outside of the PMS. So there's some inherent risks there. The PMS, the user interface of the PMS can change, so that will automatically take your robot down. And in addition, there's some performance concerns. When you're behaving like a human, but you are clicking at 100x the rate, there is implications around the core application's performance that these folks using RPA may not be aware of in terms of its impact to the application end user or to practices themselves.
And one point there, so going back 2-3 years ago, we, as a vendor, as a software company in dental, there's kind of two roads that you can take. You can partner with the practice management systems, or you can kind of go around them and use RPA. It's obviously not so easy to work with the major practice management systems, especially when you're first getting started. But we've taken that approach to have official partnerships and use APIs and kind of have to go the kosher route. It's definitely been the right approach. The bigger the groups that we speak with, they won't work with vendors that are kind of going around the practice management system. There's obviously the risk of getting shut off, which would be extremely disruptive, especially if you've invested time in getting those vendors set up. And then obviously there's been major breaches and incidents over the past 2 years that from vendors, DSOs, service providers, and so that's the tolerance for that we're seeing is definitely waning.
As it should be.
For good reason. Yeah.
There should never have been any tolerance for that, to begin with. And the companies that were trying to go around the system, got burned in many cases. So, being able to do this, through a secure method, from endpoint to endpoint is really what we want to be getting to. Joel, one of the things that you were telling me about is that using APIs allows you to be able to pick and choose who you want to be doing business with. You can use things that either come as part of a solution, but let's say that there's a vendor that you already have a relationship with, you already have systems built out with that you want to continue using. Tell us a little bit about how APIs allow you to mix and match and create a customized tech stack for DCA.
Yeah, it's definitely convenient, right? Because we're already engaged with them, we're working with them. For example, DCA utilizes Weave as our phone platform. Well, Weave has a patient engagement tool. It can populate the schedule for our front desk staff, so they can easily see who's calling, what their appointments are, what's going on in their accounts, their billing, their invoices, and that kind of stuff. So this is, again, allowed us to be more efficient on the office. Instead of when a person calls in, okay, what's your phone number, and then do a search, and then you have to take the time for the system. It's automatically already in front of them. On the back end of it, it's scheduling appointments. on the fly, with us, and they can text the patient as well and say, okay, would you like to schedule one, and get the feedback, and then AI kicks in, which is another whole other can of worms, but it's definitely enhanced our ability to serve patients better and faster.
And Cam, you were telling me that the trend is really showing that a large percentage of DSOs, I think it was like 3/4 of DSOs, are planning to increase their investments in tech integration in the coming years.
Yeah, that's right. And, Joel can probably speak about the mandates that I'm sure he has from his organization to consistently innovate and use technology to drive better results. And certainly we're seeing that. I think as a result of that, you're also seeing a growth overall in sort of, investment into dental software, right? Different flavors of it. And, I think now it's maybe more on the RCM and clinical side because patient engagement really reach a point of saturation. But even that, I think Joel can attest now that there are all these new emerging AI-based solutions that we haven't seen before that are also looking to integrate. I would just want to note that innovation really is a few things, right? It's a mindset. It's the ability to be able to take risk, try quickly and fail, and measure the results. So from the API design perspective, it's important for us to design a platform that's easy to integrate, B, have really robust developer documentation that's really straightforward so that it's quick to really speed up, and yeah, be willing to take feedback and have the investment to really see, hey, for these emerging solutions in the market, what are some new things or different approaches that we need to take in the design of these endpoints?
Now, you just mentioned clinical AI, and we hadn't really talked about some of the clinical APIs that are available right now. Can you talk a little bit more about those, Cam, about what ones we're integrating with and that you see out on the market?
Yeah, I think that with clinical, there are of course those solutions out there that does AI-based diagnostics
For the X-rays, yeah.
For the X-rays, as well as being able to say, hey. And this is a really cool innovation, right? We know that providers are able to diagnose and create treatment plans, but can we use AI as a second opinion to say, hey, are there things that you may have missed, and then how do we define those opportunities and pull that into the PMS optionally? That's to say, be a double check or help speed up the provider experience, as well as just it's a cool tool, right, to be able to say, hey, it's not just my opinion, like it's derived from data from all of these different use cases that machine learning has ingested to provide you with some model and understanding of what treatment opportunities are available.
And Joel, I know that DCA is using AI for X-ray diagnostics. You want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing as a result of that?
Well, without APIs, the AI for X-ray diagnostics would not be possible. Let's just be honest. Like, it would just take forever to get the data to where it needs to go to analyze and populate the treatment plans accordingly. So what we're seeing in our industry, at least in our offices, is providers are buying more into the AI and overlay, and it's just, again, like Cameron kind of mentioned, it's a second opinion, but it's given them insight into something that they had not seen previously. And then it's populating a chart. And so the next time the patient comes in, they say, hey, AI recognized that there was a watch on tooth number 17 or what have you. So that the providers can easily decide how they want to plan their next appointment with the patients. And then the patients know what to expect coming in. So they know that, hey, the system provided some information on this tooth here, use a sealant, brush better, floss better, that kind of thing. It's definitely given us additional insight that we have not had previously, at least providers haven't had previously, and they're buying into it, which is great because we've seen a significant increase in production with the use of AI in the back end being integrated with APIs.
Well, and especially once again, I've been in dentistry now since 2011. I worked for 2 DSOs before I came onto the technology side of things. And anytime that doctors needed to open up one more window or do another click in order to see something, adoption went down. And so I really feel like that's one of the biggest advantages of the APIs is, when it's right inside the systems that they're already using, they don't have to open up another window in order to see it. That makes such a big difference in their adoption of it and their ability to reference it all the time, show it to the patients right there, and make it super easy for everybody to see it. And then being able to do reports off of it, I think is really key as well. And having that data in near real time makes such a big difference as you're making decisions about what levers you need to be pulling in order to increase production, increase revenue, reduce no-shows, all of these different things that you now have data points on in near real time, they can take action on because they're built into the system and they're available at a click without any kind of a delay. The scalability of operations. I have done a lot of stories for drbicuspid.com this year, talking about how DSOs are scaling up. Talk to me a little bit about how APIs really help companies as they're growing to the next stage. Joel, do you want to take that one first?
So I think scalability has to do with utilizing APIs versus traditional processes that we used to use back in the day with just pen and paper. So when I first came into DCA, it was almost 14 years ago, we still had offices on paper charts. Mm-hmm. That's a long process to get to where we are today, right? And so the scalability has definitely offered, I would say, 50% faster turnaround for everything that we do in the office. It's cost effective for expansion. When we're talking about expanding our opportunities, expanding our technology, expanding our exposure to the practices, the scalability definitely plays a huge part in that, and as it relates back to APIs.
Yeah.
And we had a question that came in. Oh, go ahead, Cam.
Oh, I'm also curious in the scalability. How about like consolidating applications, right? I'm sure as people acquire or open offices de novo, like you also get the benefit of scale if you can consolidate some applications that are already integrated via APIs, or you're able to quickly spin up a solution that they may not have in whether or not it's patient experience, RCM, or clinical.
Yeah, that's one of the things that DCA is working on in the coming years. It's one pane of glass. Like I want all vendors to just hop into the Dentacon platform so that the staff only has one pane of glass to go to access all the things they need to access, from insurance verification to scheduling to patient communication to billing, everything, inventory, with everything within the Dentacon platform, so that we're not tabbed to death. I think you kind of mentioned that early on about just all the tabs and the efficiency, or I should say the non-efficiency it is to click on each one of those tabs. So bringing it all back in a single pane of glass, doing a full integration, and that's what we're really asking our vendors to do today as they integrate with Dentacon's APIs, is not only do the integration API, but bring it into Dentacon. Do a full integration into the platform, into one pane of glass, so that it's easier for our staff to do.
Joel, we had a question that came in. I'm sorry, Derek. I was just going to say we had a question that came in for Joel that says, when you're analyzing data, what are some of the most important KPIs to look at?
So I think schedule availability is huge, as we're looking at which providers have options or appointments available in the chair. Where is there opportunity that we need to work with marketing to get those spots filled? Just our daily budgets. Understanding what our day target is, and then accessing the real-time data through the API to see how are we doing on the fly. Like, we're going to know if not sooner, the next morning, we're going to know exactly where we need to be for today in order to meet our goal for the week, or meet our goal for the month. Those are two big areas, I think. The other one is our call volume, right? So are we answering the calls? Are we turning those calls into appointments? There's opportunities there, and so APIs can help us with that as well.
Derek, we had another question that came in I'm really interested in your opinion on, as both a dentist and having worked in practices, and then also as a developer now. The question is, how quickly do you think APIs will become the norm in dentistry when it comes to connecting between the practice management system and other tools? And what will be the impact of practices that are not leveraging these innovations?
For the first part of the question, the practice, it kind of hinges on the practice management system companies. There's some of those systems you can't even plug into at all. And it doesn't, and we know that because we've tried. And some of them just, I think, kind of like culturally or psychologically are not open to it. And so I think some of that just hinges on the practice management system companies. Obviously, there's been a shift since 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Planet is definitely ahead of the curve, I would say. They're the only system really that is even talking about right back. So I definitely tip my hat to Planet for that. As far as the practices that are not leveraging APIs, I mean, what I was going to say earlier is DCA is also all on one system. Like imagine being DCA size and being on 6 different systems or 16 different systems. So however, Joel feels and the team feels, it's 16 times worse or some, some amount worse if you're on 16 different systems. So I think it's really hard. It's really hard to scale if you're not leveraging this technology. It's really hard to scale, even if not being on a cloud-based system. That's really tough. Even at the practice level, we could see we work with so many different groups now that do things differently and have different systems in place, and the team is wiped out. Like everyone in dentistry and DSO like works really hard, but the teams are like wiped out for the wrong reasons in some of these offices where they're not leveraging this stuff. Like it's one thing to be wiped out for the right reasons, but it's one thing to be wiped out for doing something that a computer could just do.
Yes.
So I think
it's difficult to kind of elaborate what you're saying, Derek. It's difficult to standardize your processes when you have multiple platforms, right? And so that's one of the things that DCA
impossible. I think,
really work through is trying to standardize our platforms on Denicon or Cloud9 and make sure that if you limit the number of platforms that you have, you can streamline your processes, your workflows, make things more efficient for everyone involved.
We had a question that came in, and it's a little bit more on the technical side of it, which is about how long does it take to set up an API efficiency? I don't know. There's a lot of things that go into that. So maybe, Cam, you can kind of begin with what is the process of this, both from a DSO side of things and then from a vendor side of things.
Yeah, so when you think about setup, it's basically 2 or 3 steps, right? The first step is getting the authorization. The second step is, being able to get the information to start development. And the third step is, making sure that your integration is good enough to launch. I think from PDDS, or in my experience, I try to make all of that easy. So I can speak specifically to Denicon, where that process could be anywhere from half an hour to an hour to just get set up and get the credentials, and then you're able to, even prior to getting an agreement, you can go to developer.planetdds.com to check out our open set of documentations. So yeah, we really tried to make that easy. In terms of efficiencies, I mean, if you have automated campaigns that you're able to set up, or if you're able to get an agreement with AirPay and do start your eligibility verification in an automated way that completes the right back loop into Denicon, I mean, you can really achieve both time and cost savings pretty quickly, I would say.
Awesome. We're running out of time here, so I'm just going to ask each of you to kind of give your last thoughts. What is the one thing, or maybe 2 things, that you want anybody who's watching today to take away about APIs, about the concept of a dental OS system? Joel, why don't you go first?
Sure. Well, from a DSO perspective, dental industry in general, you've got to get on the API train. If you want to be up to date with technology and getting data to your staff and to your patients faster, getting more responses quicker from your patients as well. APIs are the way it's going to go. It's going to automate your workflows, like we've talked about. It's going to just help you in all facets of the dental industry. So it's the way of the future. So hang on, because technology, like I said, I've been here 14 years, and when I started, technology was 20 years old, and over the past year and a half, I've just seen it catapult. I think, Cameron, you kind of mentioned earlier, the lifestyle of technology and dentistry, and how long, what the changes that have happened over the few years, just the past 5 years. It's just been monumental. And I think we're kind of falling behind the medical industry, because medical is kind of leading the front there, and dentistry was a little behind. But we are quickly catching up. So excited about the opportunity, excited about the growth. Technology is going to move this industry further in the future faster.
And Cam, what's your takeaway?
Yeah, I think Joel has said a lot of great points. I definitely agree that we're sort of seeing some acceleration in the industry in terms of more innovation coming. So it's sort of adapt or get behind. I think PDDS definitely has spent the investment to make sure that we are ready for those innovations and continue to keep a pulse on everything that's happening in the vendor ecosystem, right? Whether it's a solution like Derek's, which is really already making an impact, to those that are still incubating, understanding, hey, what data needs are there to do large scale data modeling when it comes to predicting outcomes, not only now in the clinical space, but in the patient space as well as RCM. And being able to say that we have the resources and commitment to continue to develop APIs so that we continue to foster interoperability and innovation for the benefit of our DSO customers.
And Derek, what about you? What would you say to anybody who's listening right now?
Yeah, I would just, we talked a bit earlier about read capability and write capability. I think the biggest message that I would want to get across is what's coming with what Denticon is offering as far as write back is going to be pretty game changing. We work with a ton of Denticon groups today, and they all ask for the same thing. And the ones that we work with and the ones that we don't work with, everyone wants write back, especially as it relates to insurance verification and eligibility. And so I'm pretty psyched to see us go live and kind of see what 2025 looks like, because I think it's kind of like the holy grail.
Well, and what it comes down
Yeah.
to is everybody wants things to just be easier, right? They want to be able to do
Sure.
the jobs easier. They want to be able to have the data that they need at their fingertips. They don't want to have to be waiting, whether it's waiting on the phone, when they're talking to an insurance company, or waiting for verification. They don't want to have to be waiting for approvals to be coming back. They don't want to have to be waiting to try to get in touch with somebody to schedule an appointment. The person who's calling in doesn't want to have to be waiting on hold or have to leave a voicemail. Everybody wants things to be easy, timely, efficient, and smooth. And that's where I think that the technology is really moving us to. So I want to say thank you to all three of you for joining us today. For everybody who is watching, I invite you to go ahead and scan this QR code to learn more about APIs and the Dental OS system that we have. And if you have any questions, whether you're a DSO and you're wanting to know more about it, or if you're a vendor and you're wanting to know more about APIs, please go ahead and feel free to email me at beth.gaddis@planetdds.com, and I'm happy to connect you to the right people to answer your questions for you. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time.